First thing I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Stephen Groft, who's the head of the Office of Rare Disease Research at the NIH. And I've known Steve for a number of years, and he's always a campaigner for those diseases that have been forgotten. But we don't forget them, because these are all our kids. We're connected. And you'll see in the way he presents the things he's got to talk about, he's connected. So Steve, would you come on up and give us what you got? And I'm sure that's a lot.
Thank you. Okay. So, we'll get the slides on, and thank you, HUD. And if you notice that picture there, the hair is a little bit darker, and other things have happened. And the picture in the background was actually one of the first meetings we had in 1989, 1990. When I came to NIH, it was really the first focus on rare diseases as an office and as an activity. And I think the day I came into the NIH, it was the feeling that, well, we're doing a lot of work on rare diseases already. Do we really need a special emphasis? And I think here, 11, 22 years later, there's no doubt that there is still a tremendous need for rare diseases research and orphan products development. And the further we go along and the more diseases we discover and learn about, we realize how much we really do need to accomplish, and we're not even close yet to where we want to be. So it's quite a bit of work in the offing. And somehow HUD invited me to be the keynote speaker, but I have to be honest that the individual, the scientists, and the others here, their work far eclipsed what I've been able to do and what I've tried to do there at the NIH, and they really are the keynote speakers. And the keynote people who we deal with are the patients and the parents and the families who really sustain us and give us the energy to move forward. Without that pushing and working together, many of us really wouldn't have this feeling of accomplishment and meeting the needs of so many. So thank you for just keeping the positive pressure on all of the parties who have to become involved in research on rare diseases if we're going to end up with interventions and diagnostics. So thank you. It does make a tremendous difference as we go on. So we'll try to get the slides going here. Okay. I'm going to talk about trying to change perceptions about rare diseases. It seems like for so many years, when patients are obtaining the diagnosis, they're confronted with a number of issues that are presented to them. The first of which is very few people have the condition. And I think what happens many times, the practitioners will go into the literature and they'll see that a published article said there were 25 cases in the world. And as we're finding out more and more, there just there's no validity to what most people think about the actual prevalence of the rare diseases, because we really don't know. The next one is, and I'll just run through these because I have a little bit of extension of these perceptions later on in the slides. Little or no information is available about the diseases, little or no research interest, no treatments are available, there's limited access to rare diseases-focused clinicians, and there's little or no hope for the future. And I think as we go along and we see the advances over a period of time, and actually it's been since 1983 when the Orphan Drug Act was originally signed, that we have now. And while it is rather impressive that there have been 350 or 360 products approved, when you think of about 7,000 or so rare diseases, you realize how much work needs to be done. And I think some of the work that's trying to be done now to emphasize better ways of getting products to the market and that are safe and effective. So some of the perception, first, about very few people have the condition. And if you see this, the estimates that we've received have been between 6 and 8% of the population, and we really don't have good numbers. I think one of the things that we'd like to do in the very near future is to come up with good prevalence figures for the diseases, because we talk about this, we go and try to make arguments for more funding, and one of the first questions, how many people have the disease? And that's really not the fair standard to put forward as far as if funding becomes available. When you start to look at 18 or 20, 25 million people, that's just the patients. You start extending it to members of the family, siblings, the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and then friends in school. And all of a sudden your population grows quite a bit. I think that's what we're trying to expose, the number of people who actually are affected by these many disorders. And part of the problem, too, I think, is that there are so many diseases that when we're working with the patient groups, they naturally want to get their disease on the forefront and get research on their diseases. So sometimes it's difficult gaining emphasis for rare diseases. And so we've been working in our office trying to do things that really will be applicable to all the rare disorders. What we're finding, too, that there is a global distribution of patients, and even the definition of a rare disease differs from country to country, and here in the United States, a disorder with a prevalence of less than 200,000. I think most drug companies would acknowledge that if you have a condition with 200,000 people and you have a chronic medication, the profits will flow pretty good. But this was a number that was chosen back in the 80s that sort of thought that it's a good number to get an emphasis and to provide the incentives of the orphan drug program at the Food and Drug Administration. So again, we don't know how many disorders there are. The approximation is between around 7,000. We've had 6,500, 6,800. So again, it's a number that sort of is squishy and very soft. We just don't know for sure. When we, try to move it back down, sorry. When we talk about information available, and I think this is where a great deal of synthesis is needed to find the information that's required to live and to cope with a rare disorder. And as you look through here, you'll find a number of different sources. And I will say the resources are growing as we get more and more people on board around the world. Again, this is just not in the United States. The European Union countries, member states, and their programs in the European Commission have done a tremendous job of bringing an emphasis to rare disorders. In Latin America, the same thing is starting to happen, and again in Asia. So we're having partnerships developed, and just like the research partnerships that exist, as Hud had mentioned just a couple minutes ago, we are now seeing this conglomerate coming together of patients from around the world. The research community, certainly from around the world, are coming together to focus on the rare diseases, and the industry becoming a more global approach. We're seeing more of a likelihood of developing products that can be studied from around the world. So these are tremendous sources of information that you can find. You can find adequate information to begin to understand the disease. And there's a slide at the end, and we'll make these slides available, I guess, somewhere during the meeting or after the meeting. We have an information center. If you run into an issue or a question, please just call the information center. They're primarily staffed by genetic counselors, and we have several other physicians who are consultant when they can't answer the question. So if you have any questions, please ask us to try to help you move forward with the disorder. When we talk about little or no research interest, again, it's sometimes hard for the public to penetrate what is going on with respect to research on rare disorders. And I think at the NIH, we have several good sources of information. Clinicaltrials.gov has over 104,000 clinical trials, either that have been completed or ongoing or are ready to start recruiting. And I know there's quite a few of rare diseases. We used to have a category called rare diseases, and at some point we hope to get back to that status of having an emphasis. But if you search on individual rare disease, you can find the clinical trials. Same with another data set called Reporter that has all of the research that NIH supports. So it's a quite large database, again, but searchable by the individual disease. There's at the NIH, too, we do have quite a bit of research with respect to the orphan drugs. Last year, approximately $512 million was spent on different orphan product research. We are in the process of looking at the orphan drug category to extend knowledge about rare diseases research activity. So this will be coming hopefully within the year as we go forth and try to establish a fingerprint for the exact research that is being sponsored with rare diseases. We've been asking, and several of the pharmaceutical industry have been working with various parties now at the NIH and outside of the NIH to start sharing their chemical libraries and start sharing the products that are available for research. One of our big problems remains, as you look at research with the rare diseases, you're going to require multiple sites. and multiple investigators to really come up with adequate numbers of patients. And so one of our big stumbling blocks is this common institutional review board approval of protocols. So it's a major issue. In some cases, we're successful in getting over it, but in many cases, we're not. So it is a major issue. The cancer community has been able to work through this pretty well, but we're still not completely up to that with respect to the rare diseases. Okay, some of the other perceptions where we talked about treatments, and again, it takes a lot of digging to try to find a product, but as you know, with the drug industry, if you go through and try to get an approval for one product, often it's for one condition. And so we're starting to look more and more at other potential uses. They're called repurposing or repositioning of approved products or already in drugs that are in humans. And there are several programs that have initiated this, including there at the FDA's Orphan Products Office, and several folks at the NIH also are involved in these programs. So again, we think it's a shortcut that they're already in humans, and so much of the work that would normally have to be done as far as toxicology or preclinical work has already been done. We're finding, too, that the individual consortia or networks in which we have a number of investigators involved, including our Rare Disease Clinical Research Network, you find that we are getting improvement in patient care, and many times it's the best that we can do because there may not be any interventions available, and if we can improve clinical care, it's a tremendous advance for the patients and the families. And as we've said all along, the collaborations with the patient advocacy groups and the parents are essential if we're going to continue to make progress within the research arena. One of the major problems we have, I think, what we hear about from patients so much is how do we get to know who are the best physicians or where are the best locations to receive the care for our family member or a patient themselves. And it is quite difficult. We've found that many patients will pick up and move. They'll go to the location of the physician or the clinic that has the best knowledge of their disease, and that's where they will continue to live. So we would like to find better ways, such as we're doing today, and I think the capability of having communications that exist today, 10 years ago, just we weren't there, and I think now we need to do a better job of extending our symposia like this and our specific research conferences around the world so that people can participate and learn, and that really will foster the collaborations that we're looking for. We need to do perhaps a little bit better job and a faster job of extending the outcomes of the scientific conferences that we support so that people really do get the latest information more quickly than what we currently do, whether it's a year or 18 months after a conference that we actually publish an article about the outcomes and the conclusions. I think we can do a better job. We try within our office. Some years we'll sponsor 110, 105 different scientific conferences on rare diseases, and for each of those on our website we include the agenda, the participants, and then the presentations, and then a brief summary. But the most important thing of all this, I think, is to find who is really doing the research and clinical care and how to get in touch with them. So we think it's a good approach that more and more people will come to appreciate as we continue to move into the future. We have been in several things that you may have heard about to link up patients with the research, including our patient contact registry within our Rare Disease Clinical Research Network that people can sign up and then they are contacted as soon as the study is open, or they're provided information as well at just periodic reminders that things are still moving forward. And there's another program by the Clinical and Translational Science Awards program at the National Center for Research Resources called Research Match that will do the same thing. So we are working with them, and it is a way for patients to sign up and be informed when studies are initiated. So in response to the question and the issue of little or no hope for the future, I think within the NIH structure, you'll see a lot of new programs coming, and many of the institutes are coming on board. The Cancer Institute, National Cancer Institute, for years had numerous programs to foster the development of products for cancers, both rare and common cancers. And so several of the programs, including the new one called Therapeutics for Rare and Neglected Diseases, and RAID, Rapid Access to Interventional Development. So you can see all the acronyms. It's, I guess, is part of the bureaucratic environment that we try to shorten the titles because they become so long. But several of the institutes now, including the Neurological Institute, the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, and even the FDA's Orphan Products Program does have a grants program that will provide money for clinical trials. And we're finding, too, that the industry is coming back into the rare disease market. They understand they can be profitable, they can develop products for niche markets, for small populations, especially as we look and see more and more the international picture and globalization of the rare diseases community. They are quite readily available, and the marketplace is fairly well defined as we go forward. And I think at the heart of all this is the increased role of the patient advocacy groups. That it seems like the more active the patient advocacy group, the closer they work with their scientific advisory boards and medical advisory boards, with the research investigators, we start to get a much quicker turnaround as far as recruiting patients for studies and doing many other things related to communications. And as we look at the role of the patient groups, we find that they're asked to do a lot of activities, including educating patients, the public, often the media, and even healthcare providers. They are looked to as far as providing information, making it available. They are also asked to identify the research efforts that are ongoing or planned and become the liaison between the research investigator and their constituents, who are the patients and the families. So a lot of talent is required to run a patient advocacy group and to keep it moving. Again, we're seeing more and more outreach activities to develop the international contacts. The rare diseases, really, they know no borders, whether they're political or geographical, and we are encouraging the patient groups to work together to really speed up research. One of our big concerns remains, though, the patients who don't have representatives from patient advocacy groups. So we hope to address this with a patient registry concept that we're in a process of developing. And so why do we say, the emphasis on patient registries and contact registries? If we go around this a little bit, and I know we'll be running out of time before long, so I want to keep things moving. If we start the patient contact registry and just going, and many of the patient groups do collect the names of the individuals in the family, but it is important for more than that. It's the start of what we call the natural history studies, that we begin to follow the disease over the course of the lifetime of individuals. And we encourage the patients also to participate in donating biospecimens that are required. Try to get out of it. Okay. Someone hit the right button there, so thank you. It is a little continuum. This is quite a difference from what you'll normally see in the continuum for drug development. And I think if we can accomplish these tasks here, that it will lead to identification of possible products for use. The natural history studies are going to lead to research hypotheses, both for basic research and clinical research as we move forward, because you do get a little bit better understanding of the disorders. And we're seeing this within our own research, our rare disease clinical research network, that it was basically a clinical research network looking to foster training of the next group of next generation of researchers, as well as conduct the natural history studies and clinical trials. We're starting to find as we're getting more knowledge from the natural history, we're now kicking back into basic science to get that understanding, better understanding of the disease itself and the whole process. As we move forward and we keep moving forward, the clinical trials are going to open. We have a ready population to participate. I have to say that one of the most willing group of participants are always the patients and the families. So it is the studies are quite accessible, and they do fill rather quickly. And what we're seeing even now, many of the products that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration will require a phase 4 post-approval type study. So in essence, we're back where we're following the patients again, and we're almost back to the patient contact registry to move forward. So that's why you will hear, if you haven't already, about the need for more and more patient registries. Another way of looking at this and what we're seeing are models in which, at the heart of this, are disease-specific steering committees. Originally, we would have many of the patient advocacy groups taking this lead, and then I think the realization came that this is really much more than what many people can handle, and you need to get a little bit more sophisticated approach, but utilize the resources that are available from contract research organizations. You can keep going around, and if you see this, and many times the patients and the patient groups are the only ones who really are touching all of the organizations and all of the individuals as you go around that radio, more or less. So there have been some good models with different groups, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, alpha-1, antitrypsin deficiency, and many other disorders, that we're starting to see that there are ways of getting research done if industry really doesn't have a significant presence. And so many times the organizations have to start working and have to start to identify the potential products. I think for many of the rare diseases, for years, there's always been this tremendous need for more and more research. And now that we're moving forward, we're really actually starting to see that there are products coming. And so there's a tremendous mind shift from thinking about just doing research into drug development, because now you're getting into a whole different arena and a whole different approach to what was traditional research. So we do have to look at this quite differently than what just sponsoring research. And so there are people who are there and available to help. Our office, we're always happy to work with the patient advocacy groups or anyone who would like to talk about how to make the advances towards products and development of products for the rare disorders. And this, I'll just say a real brief slide on our Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. There are 19 consortia now with approximately 120 to 150, 160 research sites. It changes based on what studies are ongoing, which ones have been completed. It represents 95 different rare disorders within the consortia. And we do have a centralized data coordinating center, which is really essential for the rare diseases. It also, as I mentioned, has a training component for the new investigators. And if you like a little bit different, perhaps a little bit more chaotic depiction of what the individual consortia are. And each of these have 3 to 5 to 6 different diseases, some many more. And they have to be located at least at 3 different research sites in the United States and around the world. Most of them have many, many more research sites. But again, it's growing, and the first round of this, we had 10 consortia, and this second 5-year period, we've increased it to 19. And so all of a sudden, we're starting to see some good results coming with the individual diseases. So some of our current needs and future directions, we're looking to develop, and this is where so many of the patient advocacy groups and the clinicians come into play, to develop standards of care with and without interventions, because it is very, very helpful. We're trying to attract public and private funding for research and development, and that's key. There just is not enough money in either the private or the public sector, and so we have to use the money very judiciously and really identify a path that we're all going to move forward on. Improving the recruitment of patients, it can be a major issue if we're not well organized. And again, the key task here is to work with the patient advocacy groups to get together and to identify potential patients. We do need multiple research sites for most of the rare diseases. And then there's always the issue, if you don't have your critical mass of investigators who are able to recruit patients, you are going to have some problems completing clinical trials. It's just whether it be travel with the patients or just sufficient resources to keep the research moving forward. We have to look more and more at clinical trial design for small patient populations, because this is so different than what we're mostly familiar with as far as clinical trial design. And Dr. Kakis is here, and he'll talk about this too. I'm sure that it's a major, major issue when you get into studies with 10 patients or 15 patients. It sometimes can be very, very difficult, and we think there are some good programs. For example, last year we sponsored a course in small clinical trial design. We had over 1,300 people enroll online, and so there's the interest there. It's just a matter of conveying that interest out to the public. it should be drug discovery, I'm sorry, and development. It is expensive, and there's a high risk of failure. So many times you see products just not making it through to the marketplace with just a really tremendous risk. And that's what a lot of the programs are trying to do, is reduce the risk of failure so products can move forward more quickly. I think what we have to do is begin to convince the community, the scientific community, of the need for and the value of the natural history studies, really to get that understanding of the disease and the systems and the pathways that are involved with the disease. I think once we do that for more and more of the rare diseases, we'll start to see the advances that we are looking to achieve. And it's not easy. I'm not going to spend too much time about our program. I'll just give you a couple sources of funds. And in these days, if you can find sources of funding, take advantage, jump on them, because you are going to need funds from different sources. We do have a bench-to-bedside research program with our intramural program and the extramural research community. You can participate both in basic and clinical research, so that's available for funding. We started this undiagnosed diseases program. I won't talk about that because it's a growing program for patients who don't have a diagnosis. Quite a bit of work involved, but we estimate, and the number of requests that we get through our information center is approximately 6% of the calls that come in and emails are about undiagnosed diseases. Where do I go? What do I do? So we can see that there's a tremendous need. We sponsor a lot of scientific conferences, as I mentioned. We make funds available for grant applications to do this. And so if you have any thought of conferences that need funding, please contact me at the office, and we'll get things rolling. With the intramural and extramural research program, when we include the industry, the patient advocacy groups, to really get things put together and bring together a picture of what we have to do for that particular rare disease to advance research. We're also in the process of looking at inborn errors of metabolism, to look at the use of dietary supplements and nutritional interventions. And for the first time, we really are taking an approach that we need to have some evidence-based medicine for these disorders. So we're also looking at developing common data elements, and we just put up on our website the common data elements for rare diseases for patient registry. It's just the first phase. And we, as I mentioned, the last bullet there about trying to capture rare disease project funding. It's a tremendous task, but we think we're ready to go. So I will end it with that to keep us on schedule. And again, several of the other programs will come later on. If I can just maybe about 3 points here. We are almost complete an educational module for middle school kids, students, so that we can raise the sensitivity of the school population, probably around the 6th or 7th grade, to rare diseases. And so this will be introduced later on this year. We're working on the international ICD-11, the International Classification of Diseases. And so if any of your diseases are not in ICD-10, please contact me, and we'll look to see if they're going to be included in 11. And sometime later this year, we will have a beta copy working with the World Health Organization and INSERM in France. Dr. Ségolène Aimé is coordinating this. And so if you have the opportunity to look at the International Classification of Diseases, please let us know if your disease is not included, and we'll check it out. We're also working with the Social Security Administration to continue to expand their compassionate allowance program, so that if you have a request in for reimbursement or coverage of your disorder and classification with particular disorders, it can be a fast track for coverage with Social Security Administration. And so this has been a nice program that they've initiated, and it is cutting down that time of waiting for adequate coverage. So just a couple of things that we continue to be involved with, and I will end it with that. Okay? Thank you very much.